But then it goes back to our bigger question of, again, that we discussed last night. And this is what I want to kind of throw on the table for a discussion here. Why the hell does the United States still hold so tightly, cling so closely to Saudi Arabia when you consider that Saudi Arabia, according to Hillary Clinton's emails, is a funder of ISIS? Or you know, if when you consider, I believe 15 out of 19 hijackers were Saudi Arabian. When you consider their financial involvement, when you consider their ideological differences, right? And I just did not know this until tonight, but the previous king who just died, 15 daughters. He has 15 daughters who are under house arrest because they spoke out about the treatment of women in Saudi Arabia. So not only is Saudi Arabia complicit in very real threats against the United States, but they're just the antithesis of what we like to say our American values are. And yet we're in lockstep with Saudi Arabia to the point where President Obama spoke positively and just glowingly over their dictators, as though no one's going to notice that this person that you say has done so much for the cause of peace has actually done so much for the cause of undermining peace. So I'm in my mind, I'm like, why are we willing to not only ignore our best interest, to ignore our ideological interests, but not only to just ignore it, but then actually to open our mouths and actively say stuff that's just not true about Saudi Arabia? If there's anyone in the region that we should have a strained relationship with, I mean, there's a couple of people, but Saudi Arabia should be on that list as well. And sadly, it really is as simple as the amount of oil that Saudi Arabia produces. That's simply it. That's the bottom line. There's really no other, there's nothing, that's it. And that presents a problem. That presents some cognitive dissonance here, right? And that's what I want to kind of talk about, this cognitive dissonance. You consider that America has switched over. We're producing, I believe, 9 million barrels of oil a day. We've become a net exporter. We are producing as much oil, or just about as much oil, as Saudi Arabia, right? And a part of that is fracking. And you think about all the things that we could do to get ourselves off of our dependency to these dictatorial regimes, these abusive regimes that require us to get involved in these proxy wars that are bombing Yemen is one of the poorest countries in the world. And you mean to tell me we're still involved with them because of oil? Now, here's a question. I'm just going to ask the question, and you guys do with it what you please. If we could sever our ties with Saudi Arabia, and one of the things that helped us sever those ties with Saudi Arabia was fracking, where would you fall? How would you answer? What would you rather deal with? I already know the answer for a lot of you, but I want to actually know what you would do. If you could cut ties and we could treat Saudi Arabia as a state sponsor of terror, and we could go after them for their human rights violations, and we can cut this pathetic relationship that we've had with them since before Franklin Roosevelt, if we could cut that, but the only way we could cut it was through becoming fully independent, and included in that energy independence was fracking. Would you say no to fracking and say yes to Saudi Arabia? Or would you say no to Saudi Arabia and say yes to fracking? It's just a mental experiment. It's just a thought experiment. Don't lose your shit over it. Just answer, let me know which one would bother you the most. Now, considering how much we're producing, it still begs the question, why are we still maintaining this relationship? Well, perhaps we're not going to jump and say, okay, we're producing so much oil now, so now we can, cut our ties with Saudi Arabia. It's going to be a process. But just think about the implications of it, right? Think about the implications of how far we're willing to go with a nation that undermines our best interests, all because of oil. Not the first time. It's not a revolutionary thought. But when you consider the alternative, how many people would tolerate Saudi Arabia, their proxy war, their human rights violations? They would tolerate that over fracking. Or how many people would tolerate fracking over Saudi Arabia? So I'm very interested in reading your comments. Leave that in the comment section. Tell me what you think. And then also, I just thought of course, Saudi Arabia stands in complete solidarity with Palestine. So that's usually something. So it really presents a picture of the reality that I'm guilty of, and I think a lot of people are guilty of. Sometimes we oversimplify the geopolitics of a region and the domestic politics within that nation, and we oversimplify our relationship with a particular nation, right? A lot of times I have seen, and I'm afraid maybe I'm just running into some really crazy circles, but I've seen people who like to oversimplify the relationship between America and Saudi Arabia as just being one about, I don't know. I've heard all kinds of theories that I don't even want to regurgitate on the show, but it really presents a problem of how do we get off this relationship with them? And that's what I want to hear your feedback on. What I want to do right now, though, since I have a few minutes left and I don't have enough time to start a new story, I'm actually going to go to the chat room. I would love to see how people answer that question on the fly. Let's see if anyone answered that question. Let's see what anyone said. Here in California, toxic fracking waste is being dumped into our aquifers, and our food crops are being grown with toxic fracking waste. It's putting our health at risk, and I very much want it banned. Absolutely. I mean, consider the impact, right? Let's talk about the geopolitical influence that Russia has in Europe. Let's say Europe was able to completely cut themselves off of Russia's oil, right? Imagine the shift geopolitically. Imagine the shift in general, right? If the world players were able to wean themselves off of, not wean, but separate themselves off of oil coming from the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, 40% coming from OPEC. Imagine the shifting in geopolitical interest. So the question is, what's more important, right? Because that is, I want to say, an opportunity, a possible reality, but really it's more of a thought experiment than anything else, because something tells me even if we did frack our way to energy interdependence, we would still maintain cozy relationships in the region just in case. Let's see. It's not as dangerous as so many people think. Fracking equals global warming. It's an integral step towards greener energy. All right, somebody actually stood up for fracking. Interesting. Enlighten the chat room on what she needs to. Okay, not many. I wonder if you guys are still grappling with it. So I'll give you some time. We're going to cut the show. Give you some time. I want to know if, because our number one reason for maintaining this perverted relationship with Saudi Arabia is oil, would you exchange this relationship with Saudi Arabia if the price was fracking? Would you say yes to fracking and no to Saudi Arabia? Or would you maintain this relationship with Saudi Arabia and say hell no to fracking? And then later on, I'll give you what I think, what I would do. All right, folks, it's been a pleasure. As always, I will see most of you on Monday. All the patrons, I will see you tomorrow morning. Take care.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. It's Ben Dixon! If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.